and it's a bedtime story, of course, and I will be reading Elemental Ice Wolves, and this is episode 2. Where in chapter 1, which was last week, we started it off with Anders and Rayna as they were trying to survive not getting caught by the guards. And they're basically trying to survive by getting food and everything. And basically we're learning about their origin story, why Anders is an ice wolf, and why Rayna may be a scorched dragon. And I explained what those are in that first episode. And so if you're not familiar, definitely go and check that out. Thank you all for watching these ASMR videos. They're slowly picking up, but I think in due time we'll get somewhere. We'll get somewhere big with these ASMR videos, and I will be doing different ones in the future. I love doing the bedtime stories because I know a lot of people like that because that's what they grew up on, and it's nice to have someone read to you while you fall asleep. So thank you all for hanging in there with me, and just, and I pray God that you guys can just relax, take a deep breath, get you some warm lemon tea, get you a nice blanket or whatever it is, and just enjoy yourselves and know that you are safe. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Elemental Ice Wolves, Chapter 2. The next morning, Anders and Rayna were on their way to the docks early. The monthly of bar testing the trial of the staff was one of their best pickpocketing days, so neither of them wanted to miss a moment of it, and it turned out to be a good thing they started out early. The Wolf Guard were still on the street corners, far more of them than usual. The twins were forced up onto the rooftop meadows again, which was safer but took longer. Finding ways to cross the streets often meant going out of their way by several blocks. Their goal, the dockside square, was bordered by tall, thin, colorful houses on 3 sides, yellow, green, and blue, with square white window frames polished with wooden doors. The houses were squeezed together and 2 and 3 stories tall, often with more than one family living in them. On the 4th side of the square was the harbor. From far away, the docks looked like a forest, masts sticking up from the flotilla of ships from all over the world. Fallon wasn't a big island, but everyone always said that you didn't need to leave the capital city of Holbard to see the world. The world would come right to you instead, and that was because of the wind guards. High above the entrance to the port were the huge metal arches of the wind guards, the biggest artifacts in all of Fallon. They had protected the harbor for generations. The arches was marked with runes forged all along their length. The runes were the sign of an artifact and were big enough for even the largest ship to pass under. But though Anders could see straight through them to the ocean on the other side, the guards magically kept out the wind. Even when a storm raged beyond them, the harbor was always peaceful. The docks were newcomers arrived in the city of Holbard from all over the world. The safety of the harbor meant that people from every place Anders could imagine, and some he couldn't, came not only to trade but to live as well. From what Anders knew, most cities were a mix of people from all over. But perhaps none were quite as varied as as Holbard, the dock where where traders waited for news of their. And I apologize, you guys, for how they have this written in this book. You know, the pages are kind of crazy. But anyways, where merchants and fishers plied their wares, and where Anders and Rayna picked pockets once a month during the trail, occasionally on other days too. The trial of the staff was a spectacle, and it meant a square full of visiting merchants who were usually so busy gawking at the 12-year-olds on the dais that they never noticed the 12-year-olds right beside them slipping a hand in their pocket or basket. The visitors all knew of elementals found in their homelands, but ice wolves and scorched dragons were unique to Velen, and nobody wanted to miss seeing a child transform into ice wolf before their very eyes. Anders was never entirely easy at the docks. He and Rayna had no idea where they had been during the last great battle 10 years ago, but Anders thought perhaps they'd been here. There were always something about the place that made him nervous. He would look at the scorch marks on the wooden doors, and for an instant he thought he could smell smoke. The crowd would jostle him, which never bothered him anywhere else, and it was as if he heard a scream quickly snatched away. Sometimes he had nightmares about it. Today, the twins climbed down from the wood rooftops a couple of streets away and made their way on foot to the square. As they reached the edge of the crowd, a warm, salty smell came wafting in their direction, and Anders knew it immediately. Somewhere, a merchant was selling roasted feeder nuts, and their favorite. They only managed to pickpocket 2 coppers on the way down to the docks, but he and Rayna whispered the same words at exactly the same time. What about? They both paused to snicker, then finished together. Breakfast. We'll have more money before the morning's out, Rayna said. Let's have a treat. They squeezed their way through the tight press of the bodies, following their noses. And sure enough, there was a woman in a bright green coat, roasting glossy brown Vater nuts in a large cast iron pan. There was no fire underneath to warm it, but there were runes carved all around the outside of the pan, marching alongside its edge in a neat procession. And it was heating itself without any fire needed. A copper, a bag, the merchant said, noticing them looking. Usually it's a copper for 2, Rayna protested. Are they some kind of special nuts? They're artifact cooked, the woman replied. The heat's more even than you'll get over any fire, and you'll taste the difference. No burn bits. Rayna grumbled, but Anders knew her mouth had to be watering as much as his, and in the end, she handed over their 2 coppers. The woman handed them each a fat paper bag size of their fists stuffed full of roasted nuts, and they drifted into the crowd, marching through them as fast as they could. My God. Anyways, it was nearly time to start. They dodged the back of 4 U4 Academy students, teenagers who had passed the monthly trials already. would one day be wolf guards who wandered by in their gray uniforms, trimmed with white to show that they were students. They were often enforced Anders noticed. Suddenly, everyone's attention turned to the dais on the side of the square, and though Anders couldn't see over the heads of the crowd, he knew the drill must be beginning. He licked his fingers clean and stuck the last of his feeder nuts into his pocket. Oh my god, that sounded so much funny and weird. It was the start of spring, and the only remaining traces of the snow were the gray lumps around the edges of the square, but he was still wearing his winter coat. It was lined with pockets where he could stash his takings, and the cold wind that still blew meant it wasn't out of place. He and Rayna drifted along the edges of the crowd, and where the people were less tightly packed, looking for their first target and pretending not to know that each other. The siblings might have the same curly black hair and the same medium brown skin, but somewhere like Holbard, where people came from every place that was no reason to think that they were related, and everything else was so different about them that they looked nothing like twins. Ender spotted a woman with her head craned back, staring up at the sky nervously. The rumors about dragons were everywhere. Her expression was distracted, and her clothes looked expensive, which might mean good pickings. He bumped her shoulder against Rayna's, nodding in the woman's direction. Rayna stopped to fiddle with the buttons on her coat, looking over his target from beneath her lashes. Then she shook her head just a fraction. Sips, she murmured. Anders shuffled a step to his left, taking a surreptitious look at the woman's pockets. He sucked in a quick breath. No wonder she was so absent-minded. She had no need to worry about her pockets at all. They were lined with chunky metal zips, and hanging from each zipper was a small little metal charm engraved with a pair of runes. He nearly reached for a thief catcher, and if he laid his hands on the zips to open her pockets, the charms would have started blaring a quick high alarm, turning every face in the square toward him. It would have been a disaster. Trust him to get it wrong. He bit his lip, and Rayna gave his hand a quick squeeze. Never mind, the squeeze said, and led him onward. He let her pick the next target. He wasn't as good as she was at pickpocketing anyway, or at lockpicking, or anything really, but he was always worst of all in the square where he was nervous. Rayna chose a merchant just as the leader of the wolves, the fire stuff. Damn sacred Turnson took to the dais. The mayor of Holbard and 2 members of Valen's parliament already stood waiting for her in their finest coats and gold-linked chains of office, but everyone in the square, everyone from Valen at least, knew where the real power was on the wooden stage. Sacred Turnson was a pale woman with short white blonde hair, lean in her gray uniform, the opposite of the man Rayna had picked for their target. Their mark was a broad-shouldered man with a bright and red and blue jacket of thin, silky material that fluttered in the breeze. The red on his coat was was their first clue that he would be an easy target. It was the color of a dragon, so locals rarely wore it. The flimsy materials and the long sweeping sleeves of the merger coats suggested he came from the Dewdrop's archipelago, and that he noted that he most likely arrived recently, and since he clearly hadn't planned for Valen's cold winds, as a newcomer all his attention was probably on Sigrid Turnson right now, and possibly of how much he wished he had a practical coat. Now more than ever, we must remain vigilant. The Firestaff was saying, her voice ringing out across the square as Anders took up position. He had heard this speech every month since he was 6, but it never sounded boring. The power in the Firestaff's voice was always kept a part of his attention on her. Rayna did a pretty good impression of the speech, but Anders could never find it in himself to laugh at Sigrid Turnson. And after 10 years of peace, she continued, the dragons wish to turn toward war once again. Well, that part of the speech was new. Things really must be serious if the Firestaff was acknowledging them out loud. 10 years ago, the Wolf Guard drove them back from Holbard to their refuges in the mountains, and now we would stand ready to do so again. We know that anyone here could be of scorched dragon blood, could be a spy willing to risk the safety and stability we have worked so hard to build in the last decade, across all of Phelan. Anders stared at her as she spoke, a shiver running through him that had nothing to do with the nerves that the dogs usually awoke in him. Even though she spoke, the battle of each month reminded the Valentinites of the danger and sacrifices the wolves have made. This month was more intense than usual, and it edged to her voice. Casually, Rayna slipped into place just in front of the merger, apparently choosing that moment to right the tater ribbon at the end of her braid. She adjusted her copper hairbands and fiddled with her bow a little, tucking in a stray black curl, and then flung the braid back over her shoulder. It was in the same moment she released a pinch of finely grounded pepper from between her thumb and forefinger. It whiffed straight up to the merchant, who was already drawing breath in indignation at having Rayna's hair shaken in his face. Anders' job was to slip 2 fingers into the man's pocket. Her thumb was too bulky, and let them graze along the silk of the lining until he found his coin purse. Quickly he eased it free, then dipped it inside his own coat, dropping the purse into one of the pockets. It felt light, though probably just a couple of coppers. He left the man in the middle of the sneezing vent and slid sideways past a pair of local merchers in brown coats. Rayna would meet him away to the man's right, as always. Together they sat off in search of their next mark. Anders extracted a small purse from a woman in a yellow dress, busy gossiping with her neighbor, while Rayna politely wished him the time, keeping away from the front of the crowd. The Wolf Guard lined the edge of the dais as the Firestaff spoke, all alike in their gray uniforms, hair cut short, eyes narrow as they swept across the crowd. It was like they were beaten into the same shape that when they were walked through the doors of the UFAR Academy. Each one turned out from the same mold. Secret was speaking again, who now claims ice wolf blood and have reached their 12th birthday. Step spores to be tested. Many fellow knights proudly claim at least one wolf in their ancestry, but few have the gift that will allow them to transform. The words gave Anders a shiver. The gift she was talking about could change someone's life forever in an instant. With this rare gift, the Firestruff said grandly, comes great responsibility and obligation to enter the UFAR Academy, to join the Wolf Guard and devotes one life to protecting Valen. It means life as a soldier. It means a brutal gust of wind tore through the square. Oh my god, my bad. Revving away her words, the crowd staggered and some fell, screams raising all around Anders. In an instant, he was in the middle of the memory this place always tried to bring back. The screaming was terror. The wind was carrying smoke, and as Rayna grabbed for him, he saw a moment out of the corner of his eye. He whirled around to see something huge moving. Amidst the sea of ship's masts, and his brain conjured up the rumors from the night before, conjured up the memory of the dragon he'd seen with his own eyes just half a year before. His mind made the following ship sail into the dragon, swooping into the port, and then the wind was gone, and he saw the dragon was no more than cloth and realized the screams were dying away. His heart slammed into his chest as the people around him picked themselves up. The artifacts of veiling, a woman well nearby. The dragons are doing it, another hiss. Up on the dais, the Firestruff was looking as calm as ever, as if nothing had happened. The wind arches sometimes require venting, she said, raising her voice over the hubbub of the crowd. That should have been arranged for the nighttime, and when nobody would have been disturbed. My apologies. Now let us continue with the trial of the staff, who seeks to join the Wolf Guard and play their part in protecting our people. The crowd was still murmuring as 5 children, his own age, walked up to the steps to the dais. 3 girls and 2 boys. They were each dressed in their best, and the last girl in line was shaking so hard Anders was pretty sure she was going to fall off the stage before she made it up into the staff of Haida in the trial itself. Anders was still trembling pretty hard himself after the surge of wind had given him. There were at least 24 more children queuing for their for the chance to make it up onto the dais. Most of them wouldn't succeed. In a good month, 2 or 3 candidates would successfully transform, and Anders always felt sorry for the ones who failed. The boys stepped up to stand front and center as a member of the guard, handed Sigrid the staff. Its Sigrid nodded, and the boy's face drained of what little color it had until it almost matched his fine white coat. He last spoke, he was so nervous his voice shook as he lifted it to be heard over the noise the crowd was still making. My name is Nathan Hogan. Not Hogan, Hogan. My grandfather is Burkhard Hogan, who was a member of the Wolf Guard. My great-grandmother was Serena Anderson, who was a member of the Wolf Guard. My brother Nicholas Hogan transformed 3 years ago and is a student at Holbard Academy. I claim Ice Wolf blood and stand for the trial. Sigrid and many of the crowd nodded as Nathan looked sidelong at the fire stove. Even from his place in the crowd, Anders could tell Nathan was gazing at the amulet hanging at the woman's throat. The amulet was a small ring of gray polished metal suspended on a leather band, engraved with a design and runes. There were stories about what the amulets did, and that they allowed a wolf to tell when you were lying. That they gave a wolf the strength of 10 people, or perhaps just that they were the only way of knowing a true member of the guard. Whatever they were for, Nathan was staring at Sigrid like it was his ticket to the new life. In a way, he was right. It was life Anders would never have, though. He never belonged to anything as important as Ulfar, and he never had a family lineage he could recite like that. And Rayna was all he had, and she was more than enough, he reminded himself. But sometimes, especially on the hungry days, he wished he too had a mother or father, aunts or uncles or grandparents. The boy reached for the staff of Hada, then hesitated. So many hands had gripped it over the years that the bow wolf was worn smooth, a long strip of engraved metal wrapping around it in a spiral. That the staff was one of the most important artifacts in Valen. Only the most powerful were named for their creators, and for the wolves that the staff of Hada has transformed, it was a ticket to a new life. Bracing himself, Nathan grasped the staff, and the whole square held its breath. Even Anders and Rayna paused, standing side by side. Nothing happened. Several heartbeats later, Sigrid reached out to rest her hand on Nathan's shoulder, slowly guiding him back and away from the staff. Valen thanks you for your willingness to serve, she said. But as she released him and stumbled to the edge of the dais to walk slowly down the stairs, she already looked hungrily at the next girl in line. Anders bit his lip, watching the other boy's shoulders slump. The next girl didn't transform either. Rayna grabbed Anders' hand, giving him a squeeze as a reminder that they had work to do. They picked their way through the crowd, scoring a copper here and another 2 coppers there. Rayna doing the bold work of destruction. Anders carefully taking hold of the money and trying not to alert his marks or mess it up. The familiar ceremony wore on in the background as the candidate after candidate recited their lineage as a proof of their right to undertake the trial. Trembling and grasped the staff, the mood in the square grew darker as every single one of them stubbornly stayed in human shape. No, now more than ever, Valen needed more wolves, more members of the guard, more defenders. But this must yield up none at all. Anders couldn't remember there ever been none before. He slid his hand into a tall man's fancy coat pocket. As a frail-looking girl made her way down the steps, head low, the twins were a little closer to the dais and a little farther from the escape route than Anders liked to be. Rayna, completely confident as she tossed her braid again and accidentally bumped into a pair of merchants, but Anders had her courage, and his hand was shaking as he tried for one final coin. He couldn't help watching the girl making her way down from the stage, feeling bad for her. Her shirt and trousers were neat, but plain, a little old-fashioned. She came in front from the countryside with her parents, most likely, and it will be a long trip home with nothing to show for it. He curled his fingers around a coin that felt heavy, silver perhaps, and maybe because his mind was on the girl, imagining the creak of the cart as they drove home in silence, he caught his wrist on the seam at the edge of the pocket, and for an instant his hand was stuck. He cursed inwardly, easing it free, lifting onto the balls of his feet as so he could step back the moment it was clear. But it was too late. The merchant turned his head almost in slow motion, eyes widening, mouth opening to shout, "Thief!" He bellowed, one hand clapping down on Anders' wrist with an iron grip. Anders only had time to drop the coin back into his pocket before he was yanked off balance, hauled forward so the man could get a better look at him. No, why did he always mess things up? This boy was picking my pocket, the man announced, glaring down at Anders, his thick, blunt brows crowding together in disapproval. I wasn't, Anders protested automatically. I don't know. I don't have anything in my hand, but because I just dropped it back into your pocket. But he knew that wasn't going to be enough. When he lifted his head, he could already see a member of the guard jumping down from the dais to push through the crowd toward him, and the people around him were drawing back like they wanted to distance themselves from the crime. You're a thief, the man insisted as Anders tried in vain to stopping himself shaking, forcing himself to look at Rayna. He couldn't afford for her to be caught too. And if you have nothing, it's only because you're a bad one. And in a minute, my child, you're going to wish you had been good. Chapter 3. One moment, Anders was staring up at the merchant, holding his wrist, trying not to whimper at the pain of his wrist bones practically grinding together, breath stuck in his throat as terror crept through him, and the next moment Rayna was at his side. Don't be ridiculous, she said, barging up through a pair of women to reach Anders. Get your hands off him, you bully. He was just trying to get past. Past, the man repeated, blinking. His grip on Anders didn't slacken, but like most people confronted with Rayna, he already looked a little overwhelmed. Past, she repeated, rolling her eyes as if he needed the word spoken a little slower so he'd understand. You don't look like you're 12 to me, so unless you're here for the trial, you need to get out of the way of those of us who are trying to get in the line. You're standing right here in front of it. blocking the way. So what did you expect? It's not the boy's fault. He's too polite to shove through. And who are you? He asked, drawing himself up to his full weight, his full height, pulling Anders a stumbling step closer. Anders winced. Rayna was as nimble with her words as she was with her feet, but Anders didn't like the way this was heading. Rayna didn't miss a beat. I'm the girl who was trying to get behind him in the line, she replied, as though it was obvious. That was the first rule of defending each other. Never admit you were twins. People believe you were more easily if they didn't think that you had anything to do with the other one. Now, can we get to the dais or not? The dais Anders froze, but by now a member of the Wolf Guard had arrived. A tall woman with a flawless gray uniform, her cloak hanging open to reveal the crisp shirt and trousers below, black boots shining, the crest of Ulfar, a fierce Wolf Guard in the city of Holbard itself, snarled down at Anders from where it was fixed on her chest. You're here for the trial, she asked. Gaze falling on Rayna. We both are, Rayna said at the same time. The man still holding Anders tried to protest that they were here for nothing of the sort, but his grip slackened and Anders yanked his wrist free, rubbing it with his other hand. Then you should be on the dais, the woman said, turning to lead the way back to her without another word. But before the man had a chance to protest, Rayna grabbed Anders' hand and hauled him toward the dais in the woman's wake. People was turning toward them for every direction, and Anders kept his head down and faced high. Rayna had got them out of the frying pan into the fire as always, and he was left trying to catch up, wishing that for once he had been quick enough on his feet to know the right thing to say, the right thing to do. But instead, he was climbing the wooden stairs to the dais, only a few feet from the Farstroff herself. Every face in the crowd turned toward him, and he glanced out at them, knowing what they saw in a gangly boy in patch and battered clothes, blinking awkwardly at all the tension with her hair in the need of a cut and a face in the need of a wash. He knew as well that he was thinking about his appearance to avoid thinking of the hundreds of pairs of eyes on him, all waiting for him to do or say something that would reveal that he had no right to be on the dais at all. He and Rayna had no idea who their parents, let alone ancestors, were, but he was sure that there was nothing special about them. What happened if you touched the staff of Hada without a single drop of wolf blood in your veins? Perhaps they get out of this yet just failed the trial and managed to slip away before the angry merger caught up with them. The crowd was still nervous after that huge gust of wind, which might make it easier to disappear. Rayna, standing ahead of him, after all, she physically hauled him up the stairs, and she shot the Farstroff her most winning smile, stepping up in front and center to present her family history. This should be interesting. My name is Estrid Larson, she announced, which was news to Anders along with everyone else. though he wasn't surprised. If the first rule of staying safe together was never admitting you were connected, the second was never giving your real names. And my family is strong in ice wolf blood. My grandmother was Ida Larson, who was a member of the Wolf Guard, and what was that name? Sigrid Turnson, the foster was frowning. Ida Larson, Rayna, Estrid supplies helpfully. I don't recall her, Sigrid said, still frowning. Oh, she was from out of town, Rayna assured her guiltily. But to be a member of the Wolf Guard, she must have lived in Holbard, Sigrid shouted out. Or pointed out, my bad. The crowd was looking far too interested in this turn of events, including the merchant who had made his way to the front to wait for his turn with Anders. She had terrible eyesight, Rayna said, confident as ever, and Anders tried to hide his wins. She couldn't actually surf, it turned out. She lived a quiet life up in the mountains. In dragon territory, Sigrid's frown was now a permanent furrow between her brows. But all of the members of the Wolf Guard lived at the uniform barracks. You're about my daughter's age. I'm sure I remember your grandmother. Did I say in the mountains? Even Rayna was faltering now. Lower down than dragon territory, obviously more like foothill, really. Still, the most important thing isn't who else successfully transformed. It's whether I can, so I'll just reach across here if you don't mind. And Sigrid clearly did mind, but Rayna was already reaching past her, fingers outstretched towards the staff of Hada, and just slightly urged her on. The sooner she touched it and turned into nothing at all, the sooner they could make their escape. Even if he was going to have to recite his own imaginary lineage first. Rayna bit her lip and wrapped her hand around the smooth wooden staff, gripping it tightly. As she did, Anders realized he was holding his breath, and even though, as far as he knew, she was about to likely transform into a cabbage as a wolf. He and Rayna had started out in an orphanage, then raised themselves after that on the streets of Holbard. They weren't wolves waiting to happen. Abruptly, Rayna screamed, her eyes popping wide open, back arching as she flung out her free arm. Drawing gas from the crowd, she staggered back a step, swinging the staff of Hada, so that the two members of the Wolf Guard behind her were forced to jump out of the way. Stop, Anders urged her silently, waiting to sink down through the dais into the ground, the hot flame of embarrassment taking over his body. This was almost always selling the story, always so dramatic, but right now the last thing they needed was poor people looking at them. Rayna screamed again, dropping the staff and doubling over to brace her hands against her knees. She turned her head to cast a desperate glance at Anders and looked and like a crushing wave of ice-cold water had hit him. The embarrassment was gone. This was real. His sister was terrified, and this was nothing like any transformation he had ever seen. He stepped forward, reaching for her, but she screamed again, raw and hoarse, staggering forward to fall from the dais, crashing to the flagstones below. The crowd jumped away as Rayna All her skin was bleeding at once. Hints of gold, bronze, and copper snark got in, whatever. As Anders watched in horror, frozen to the spot, her arms and legs seemed to stretch impossibly long. The arms of her coat had stretched and split, tearing the noise of the fabric lost beneath the screams of the crowd. The fabric shredded and vanished into seconds as Rayna's body grew, doubling in size, then tripling, her neck lengthening, her mouth opening in a heart's unending scream. Crimson, bronze, and copper wove together into glittering scales as they snaked across her skin, and in a heartbeat later, Rayna was gone. In her place lay a scorched dragon 15 feet long, sprawled on its back, claws raking through the air as it roared over the sound of the crowd. It scrambled, rolling onto its side, and clambered to its feet, wings spreading wide and tail lashing in a long arc. This was impossible. Waves of heat washed over Anders as if he was far too close to a fire. His skin stung, the lining of his throat burning as he dragged down air. Attack! The Foster screamed beside him, jolting Anders from his horror. The dragon's tail swept toward him, catching him in the ribs, knocking him clean off his feet. Pain rippled through his body, and he couldn't tell whether the heat it was coming from the dragon for certain was a burning him or just blasting him. All he knew was there was a dragon right above him, roared so loudly the sound itself was like a living thing. He scrambled desperately off the dais and fell backward just as long as the snake of a tail smashed through the supports on the stage, reducing it to so much firewood. He grabbed at a plank where it lay across his body, trying to shove it off of him. Gasping for breath, he sat up, pain shooting along his ribs. The five-throated cigarette lay beside him, dazed, a cut on their forehead, bleeding. The dragon's tail thrashed about again, and he ducked, rolling onto his hands and knees where it had come from. What happened to Rayna? It was Rayna. The people in the crowd were screaming. The dragon was roaring again, but somehow that realization cut through Anders' thoughts, stopping him in his tracks. However it had happened, that dragon was his sister. All around him, members of the Wolf Guard were transforming, and their uniforms seeming to melt into their skin as they dropped to all fours, shaggy coats appearing. Where gray wool had been a moment before, teeth bared as they left their muzzles and snarled. Anders had never seen a wolf transform so close before, and their deep-throated growls were terrifying. My God. The ice wall beside him reared onto its hind legs, then crashed back down to earth as its front paws hit the cobblestones. The two long spears of ice burst from the ground, sharp and jagged, flying straight at the dragon's gleaming side. They were like huge, deadly icicles with razor-sharp points. Anders had never seen them outside of a puppet show or play, but he knew immediately what was happening. Where they struck Rayna, her scales instantly turned gray with gold. She screamed, spreading her wings, and more wolves were brought down their front paws on the ground, launching ice spears at her as Anders was forced to drop down to his belly. He sensed them slicing through the air more than he saw them like clean cold arrows through the confusion of the heat. The dragon brought her wings down in a great sweep, and with her tail thrashing and her claws grabbing at the air as though to lift herself, she somehow took off. The down drop flattened Anders, and he scrambled for the shelter of the wreckage behind him as the spears flew and the crowd screamed and the wolves howled. Then, beside him, he saw it, the staff of Hada. It was half buried in the wreckage of the dais, along with Anders. That smooth, warm pole had somehow triggered this dreadful transformation. He had to find a way to use it to transform Rayna back, but as he tried to make himself to reach for it, he found himself yanking back his hand instead. What would happen to him if he touched it? Above him, the dragon Rayna screamed again, and he made himself grab for the staff. Pain rushed through him, setting his arms and legs on fire. The screams of the crowd grew unbearably loud, his ears filling with the highest wall of noise. His nose suddenly filled with the scent of sweat, of wet woolen clothing, and the musk of wolf fur. He felt his shirt tearing, and as his senses overwhelmed him, he could only think of one thing: run. He dug his fingertips, his claws, his what? Into the flagstones, scrambling free of the wreckage and pushing through the crowd, shoving a pair of knees aside and hurtling through a forest of legs. He suddenly broke free, tearing up a straight past the stationary wheels of a wagon and the legs of two rearing horses, past the houses and the wooden doorways that still show their singe marks. Finally, he turned a corner to find an alleyway, a stack of crates at one end offering a place to hide. He scampered, and behind him, his breath coming in quick, short pants, his tongue lolling out as he tried to show his thoughts, forced himself to calm. All around him was the scent of moss and mildew that grew in the shady alleyways. The sun never reached this muddy mush of melting snow, the wet wood of the crates. The lines of the alleyway were perfectly crisp, but the colors of the world had faded, subdued, as if the night was falling, as if he run so fast he left all the bright shades of Holbard behind. But he was free of the crowd. Shaking, he looked down and saw two great paws stretched out in front of him. He tried to shout, but all that came out was a yelp. Suddenly seized by panic, he spun into a circle, stretching out his tail to catch his balance. And his tail, understanding, caught up to him in a rush, and he heard himself softly whimper. Rayna was a scorched dragon, and he was an ice wolf. He forced himself to stay silent, to stop painting, and to again try to desperately collect his thoughts. He had to bind her. He had to explain to somebody that he was no dragon. She wasn't the enemy. She was his twin, and it was impossible for the same family to transform into both wolf and dragon. The wolves defended Valen against the dragons. It was forbidden to even befriend one, let alone share a family. Somehow, this had been done to her. He was positive she was his twin, so there must be trickery involved, and he had to make the wolf guard understand that she wasn't on the side of the dragons before they hunt her. But first, he had to find a way to become human again, so he could speak. Though he was unquestionably still himself inside of this new body, the influx of extra information he suddenly sharp senses insisted on providing was tugging his thoughts in a different direction every moment. His nose and ears kept reporting on new sounds and scents, trying to steer his thoughts into new and different directions, to pay attention to everything happening around him. He closed his eyes and looked inside himself, trying to remember what it felt like to be human, noticing the differences and separating them out. He pushed his mind deeper into the human feelings and memories, and suddenly he felt the change surging toward him like a sneeze. And with a rush, he was human again once more. He felt the cold cobblestones against the soles of his feet and the tips of his fingers, and he could but wait. If his feet were bare, where was his boots? Forget his boots. Where was his clothes? Anders made a sound very like the whimper he made as a wolf, dropping his head. Of course he was naked. Of course he was. The wolf guard might have absorbed their uniforms into their fur somehow, but he felt his shirt rip, and to think he had been stupid enough to assume just for one moment that his day couldn't get any worse. Clearly, he'd been wrong about that. He heard a roar from the sky overhead and tipped his head back just in time to see the dragon. Rayna. The dragon was Rayna. Soared past, winking her head toward the farmland outside the city. Suddenly he became aware of the screams outside the streets of Holbard once more. Rayna, he shouted as she vanished. Rayna, come back. I'm here. You can change back. You can. But Rayna was gone, and Anders had never been more alone.